How are Nigerians expected to survive when fuel prices continue to rise with no end in sight? The Nigerian government has officially announced yet another price hike, increasing the cost of petrol by 58%. Last week, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, revealed that the price of petrol has jumped from 568 naira to 897 naira per litre, depending on the location. While this latest increase is staggering, it's just the latest in a series of painful fuel price hikes that have hit the nation over the past 2 years. Since April 2022, the price of petrol in Nigeria has soared by an astounding 418.5%, making it difficult for millions of Nigerians to afford the fuel they rely on for daily life. For years, fuel has been the backbone of Nigeria's economy, powering homes, businesses, and public transportation. But with skyrocketing prices and ongoing shortages, the daily reality for most Nigerians has become a struggle. The government's removal of fuel subsidies earlier this year further complicated the situation, forcing people to pay more at the pump while receiving no significant improvements in supply. As Nigerians face these rising costs, they are left wondering, how much longer can this situation continue? The consequences of these fuel price hikes go beyond just the numbers on the pump. Every aspect of daily life is being affected, from transportation costs to the price of goods in the market. For bus drivers like Nuruddin Kasim, who has been working in Lagos for over a decade, this latest increase is especially painful. He has had to raise the fare for a trip from 300 naira to 500 naira just to cover the cost of fuel. Passengers complain about the fare hikes, but there is little he can do. The price of fuel is out of his control, and the costs keep going up. Kasim says it used to take him just a few minutes to fill up his tank, but now he waits in long lines at petrol stations, only to pay more for less. In other parts of the country, the situation is just as grim. In the markets, the cost of everyday items has risen dramatically. A vehicle spare part that used to cost 500 naira now sells for 2,500 or even 3,000 naira, leaving many people struggling to find affordable replacements for basic needs. In Kano, the cost of filling a fuel tank has jumped from 15,000 naira to a whopping 80,000 naira, a price that is simply out of reach for most families. Meanwhile, salaries have remained stagnant, and many workers are now feeling the pressure of trying to stretch their paychecks to cover the rising costs of transportation, food, and fuel. For Nigeria's small businesses, the situation is even more dire. Over 90% of businesses in Nigeria are classified as small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and most of them rely on petrol-powered generators to keep their operations running. With the national power grid remaining unreliable, these businesses have no choice but to use generators to power their shops, factories, and offices. But with petrol prices now exceeding 1,200 naira per litre in some areas, many of these businesses are being forced to make tough decisions. Should they raise their prices, reduce their operations, or close their doors entirely? The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has already issued warnings that the petrol price hikes will inevitably lead to even higher prices for goods and services across the country. As Nigerians see their disposable income dwindle, the impact of these rising costs is creating widespread economic instability. Items that people could afford last week are now out of reach, and the prices of basic necessities like food, clothing, and transportation continue to rise. The association has also expressed concerns about the long-term impact of these price hikes, noting that businesses may be forced to lay off workers or reduce their operations if the situation does not improve. Meanwhile, NNPC is facing its own set of challenges. Despite reporting a profit of 3 trillion naira in 2023, the corporation's financial health has been called into question. A closer look at NNPC's financial statements reveals that while the company reported profits, it also faces future obligations that exceed 3.8 trillion naira, effectively cancelling out any real gains. NNPC has been accused of mismanagement and corruption, with critics pointing to the corporation's bloated expenses and excessive spending on non-essential items. In 2022, for example, NNPC donated 314 million naira to its charity foundation, but in just 1 year, That number skyrocketed to 11.3 billion naira, with over 90% of that amount going to the NNPC Foundation. At the same time, the corporation's top management officials saw their compensation more than double, from 1.3 billion naira in 2022 to about 3 billion naira in 2023. These expenses have raised serious questions about NNPC's priorities, especially as the corporation faces mounting debts to international suppliers. Reports indicate that NNPC owes over $6 billion to suppliers, and each delayed payment comes with a hefty penalty. Every time Nigeria delays payment for a shipment of fuel, it incurs a $250,000 fine. With the exchange rate at 1,600 naira to the dollar, these penalties add up quickly, further straining NNPC's finances. Meanwhile, Nigeria's tenders for fuel have dropped from 1 million tons per month to just 850,000 tons as the government struggles to keep up with demand. The introduction of the Dangote Petroleum Refinery, Africa's largest private refinery, was supposed to provide some relief. The refinery, which began operations in September 2024, promised to produce locally refined petrol at more affordable prices. But hopes were quickly dashed when NNPC announced another price hike just as the refinery started production. The price of petrol jumped from 617 naira to 897 naira per litre, leaving Nigerians wondering whether the refinery would actually deliver on its promise of cheaper fuel. As the fuel crisis deepens, many experts are calling on Nigeria to look to other oil-producing countries for solutions. Nations like Saudi Arabia and Norway have successfully managed their oil wealth to create long-term stability, using revenues from oil to invest in infrastructure, education, and sustainable energy. Nigeria, with its vast reserves of crude oil, could follow a similar path, but it would require significant reforms in how the country manages its oil resources. The Nigerian government has already taken steps to address some of the issues in the oil sector, but much more needs to be done. One suggestion is to privatize NNPC and allow Nigerians to buy shares in the company, turning it into a truly competitive corporation. Others argue that Nigeria should focus on refining its own crude oil domestically, rather than relying on imports of refined petroleum products. This would not only create jobs, but also reduce the country's dependence on foreign suppliers and the volatility of global oil prices. In the meantime, Nigerians are left to cope with the daily reality of high fuel prices and economic uncertainty. How much longer will they be able to endure these rising costs? Will the government take action to provide relief, or will the situation continue to worsen? As the fuel crisis continues to unfold, we want to hear from you. How are you managing with the high cost of petrol in your area? What impact has it had on your daily life? And what do you think the government should do to resolve this issue? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on this developing story.